Welcome to The Lift, where we dig into what's next in revenue, tech, and go-to-market strategy. Looking ahead to 2026, SaaS pricing is evolving fast. The old seat-based subscription model isn't dead, but it's no longer the default. AI is speeding up the move towards flexible, value-driven models, usage-based, credit-based, and even outcome-based pricing, all better aligned with how customers experience value in an AI-powered world. Here to help us unpack this transformation is Jonathan Kvarfordt. Jonathan wears a few hats. He's head of GTM Growth at Momentum.io, where he helps teams streamline workflows and scale through AI-powered revenue orchestration. He's also the founder of GTM AI Academy and the co-founder of the AI Business Network, two communities focused on driving AI adoption across go-to-market teams. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Let's do a couple of warm-up questions. Start with your AI journey. From what I've seen, watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts, you were already dabbling with AI before ChatGPT emerged on the scene. So walk me through what you were thinking, what you were experimenting with, and how the emergence of ChatGPT galvanized your interest in AI.
I just want to say again, thank you for having me, and I appreciate everyone listening. I know it takes time out of your day, so hopefully we can make this worth your while. My journey is a little bit weird, where I was in sales for 10 years and I shifted over to enablement. If you don't know what that is, I call it the way, if it's ran well, it's like an internal McKinsey group inside of your company, make sure things are performing well, and does a lot of training and education, that kind of stuff. But the goal is help teams perform. I was at a company who bought an AI technology that was built from scratch from a guy in India that was literally like these kind of conversations, but it would analyze your voice, your facial recognition, all this stuff to do body language stuff. This was like 6 years ago. It's crazy. But he built it from scratch, and the tech was bought. He became our chief AI officer for the company, obviously, because he was smart. And I was in charge of translating his AI speak and stuff to both the customers and to our internal team, so they knew how to sell it, support it, and also the customers knew what the crap it was, back before ChatGPT was a thing. He was also on, I can't remember what it was, like some sort of red team, blue team, something like that, giving feedback for GPT-1, GPT-2, et cetera, through OpenAI's involvement. He kept me posted saying, hey, I found this cool tool we're advising. It's going to be awesome. You're going to love it. I'm like, when can I have access? And when it finally came out in November of 22, he said, you need to go sign up for this. So I did with the other bajillion part of the world, and everyone signed up for ChatGPT and started playing with it. And I realized from both my enablement background and from what I learned from him, that most people, when they were talking to AI, weren't doing it correctly back in the GPT days of 3.5 and the first models. So I launched the Academy a month after, saying, I'm going to do something about this and start to tell people about how I think you should use this based on my using it internally for the team and also from him. So that kind of began my journey. And then since then, I've been in it for 3 years now. It's been 3 years last December, which is 3 years and a month now. And I've just kept in touch, obviously kept tabs with all the different tools coming out. And I teach at Bryant University at nights, AI 101 AI in sales for people in the marketplace. And I advise 10 different companies on AI and GTM strategy. And I appreciate saying my title, but I'm now the GTM strategy VP of Momentum. And Momentum is an AI orchestration platform. So I do a lot of the back-end prompting and the agent training for Momentum, along with the other brilliant people inside of the company, which is a blast to work with them. So I'm literally eating, breathing, sleeping, selling, talking, teaching AI all day long. And it's a blast. So I love it.
And one of the interesting things about the technology landscape is when you think something amazing is happening, a few years later, something even more amazing happens. And I feel like we're just at the cusp of this AI transformation. Is that as much as everybody's hyped up about AI, it's early days. And it must be an amazing feeling to be on the vanguard, to be in the eye of the hurricane when all this amazing stuff is happening. I admire the position that you're in. It's really great to be at the right place at the right time. Shifting gears, I do want to go back to AI. When you talk to go-to-market leaders these days, what's keeping them up at night? There's so much change happening. So what are they worried about? And on the flip side, what are they fired up about?
It depends on the size of team in the industry, but in general, what I hear is a lot of overwhelm. There's just so many tools, and all the tools change all the time, and trying to keep up with everything is like, I don't know of anybody in the space. I don't consider myself an expert. I'm a nerd. I'm an AI nerd. I know AI experts, and even the experts can't keep up with what's happening. So I think in general, people are just extremely overwhelmed. And as a result of that, they don't know where to start or what's actually working because there's a lot of hype and fluff. So everyone in the market space talks the same. Like I try to talk differently with marketing, but a lot of companies talk a lot the same. So people don't know what actually has results or not. And it causes, again, overwhelm and confusion and not knowing what to do. It's a problem because when your job is to implement tools to get results and you don't know when actually legit or not, that becomes a problem. So I think people are looking for real transformation and real impact on their roles or jobs, whatever it is, and they're just having a hard time figuring it out. Now, I think what they're excited about is that the people who are willing to do the work. So I think one of the challenges is people hope to have a tool come in, implement a tool, and all of a sudden they transform the business and they have 10 times pipeline, and that just doesn't work that way. Transformation requires a human team-based change that most people are not ready to do, but they think they are because they're like, hey, it's do an AI tool. It's not that simple. The teams that do a lot of good work are the ones who do the fundamental foundational process, like you say, systems to make sure things are working well. And when people do that, and what I see when people are excited is when they see the results of that, it's like exponentially higher than it was before. But most people, again, they're not ready for that. And they think they are, and they get frustrated when they're not ready for it. And then they have to go through the process. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting commentary because I was talking to someone recently about AI deployment. And one of the things that she was adamant about was having what she called the knowledge layer in place. So you can deploy all these AI tools, but if the foundation isn't rock solid, then you may not get the ROI that you expect.
I've been thinking about this a lot of how I'm going to unveil this in the next version of the Academy. Before it was all prompt engineering for years. This last, let's say, year, 6 months, it's been more about context, about how do you engineer context. And prompting is still important, but even more important is the context that it has access to. If I have a well-defined context layer or information layer, and then I have integrations to tools, prompting becomes insanely easy. Prompting is difficult when you don't have that. That's when you have to have more advanced type of prompting. When all that's taken care of, if I have a subset of data, a notebook LM or something, and all I have in there is my last 100 calls, it's narrowed to those 100 calls, and therefore my prompts don't have to be as advanced because it's narrowed in the scope of data that it has access to. So I try to help people understand that. And when they do, they get a lot more impact with it. It's just, again, trying to keep up with all the changes of what's possible.
Let's shift gears let's nerd out a little bit on AI. You've talked about the evolution from generative AI to agentic workflows, where AI isn't just helping people work faster, it's actually doing the work. If you look at some of the technology happening, is absolutely transformative and a game changer. As that shift accelerates, what does it change about how we define and price value in a deal? Do RevOps teams need to think about packaging and pricing, not just beyond seats, but beyond the human capacity as the core unit of value?
What's interesting about this is that when you look at all the tech stacks or the people in AI who are doing really well, like a Lovable, Cursor, 11 Labs, et cetera, it's a monthly pricing model. Now it is based on credits, but it's a finite amount they're being charged a month. It's $99 a month or whatever, and that gets you so many credits. So yes, the model has changed a little bit, but it's still a monthly subscription that people can count on. So I've not seen anyone who's uber successful that has a different pricing model than that. I haven't seen it. Name one company who's in AI, is an AI leading company that does not have a monthly subscription and does it by outcome only. From an accounting point of view and business point of view, I can't just say, hey, give me all these outcomes and I'll pay you a blank check of whatever you're going to give me. I can't do that. So there has to be some balance between the two. But to your point, though, I think there is this balance of saying, what would the world look like when we have this very outcome focused AI agent result of saying, hey, we'll get you this many leads. And therefore, if we do, that means you charge $1,000 a month or whatever the case is. And if you want more leads, you just pay more a month. Like it's probably going to be more of a balance between those two. So from an accounting point of view, you can actually control it. Otherwise, you just have a blank check. It's like not a good business practice to do.
Everybody loves the idea of outcome-based pricing, value-based pricing. There's a lot of experimentation going on. One of the companies that stands out or trying to do this is Intercom, which is essentially saying if we can deflect a call to a human with one of our bots, then we get credit for that. That's the way that they can generate outcome-based pricing. I think it's early days, and outcome-based pricing is a bit of a dream right now, but there's no doubt that in this world that we live in, it could be 3 months down the road and everyone's got to figure it out.
I don't think it's off the table. I just think it needs to be thought about a little bit more, because I think people think ideally it'd be cool if you did charge for that. But as an example, I know of a couple different technologies that are offsetting human costs, like talent costs. And so their pricing, their ROI model is based on saying, if we replace humans, then we take out, instead of you paying $150,000, you'll pay $50,000 for this AI that can do 10 times the work of one person. So that's an interesting model. But I think what's also interesting is thinking about, there's two sides of AI. The one side is, let's do what you were doing before, the exact same thing, like a human doing this practice, better, faster, easier, cheaper, whatever. That's one way. But the other way is thinking there's a whole new world being created, a new transformation of new things that AI can do that humans could never do anyways. You know what I mean? So like, I think that people need to understand that there's going to be capabilities and things that we'll start to measure that we don't know yet, because AI is capable of doing things that we are still tapping into.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's fascinating to think about that model. With Momentum, we just released a book called Ignite Your GTM with AI. And we had 30 contributors talk about what they're doing right now inside the space of GTM. And it's more about this balance between what can humans do and what can AI do. So it's not about saying, how can AI replace humans? It's really saying humans have a power and value. Let's not talk about getting rid of them. Let's talk about amplifying them. And then also, there's this whole other category of things that AI can do that humans can't do. So let's stop talking about AI replacing humans. Let's talk about, where do you put each one and how do you architect that in a system that works for the business? Does that make sense? And I think that's the world we're going into, is that people have to be willing to let go of what they were doing before and find, based on jobs to be done or first principle thinking of, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the experience we want the customer to go through? And how do we use AI to make that best experience possible? And where do we put humans in the same place to make sure it's the best it can be?
I love the jobs to be done framework. It really makes it easier for salespeople or marketing people to imagine what the impact is on our products. At the end of the day, it's all about helping people do their work. And if you can figure out a way to empathize with them or relate to them better, that's always a good thing. I want to dive deeper into pricing. You've used the faster horses versus cars analogy before, which I love. When AI is driving efficiencies, and everybody talks about that these days, like automating tasks, surfacing insights, or accelerating decisions, the $64,000 question is, how should companies rethink pricing?
It's a good question. I thought about this a lot. I don't have a perfect answer for you, to be honest with you, because it changes every month. When you think about the core, sorry, I'm again going to first principles. Why do we have prices? Prices are assuming there's a value attached to whatever you're giving to someone, right? So the question is, what is the value? So I remember when GPT-01 came out, and one of the examples they made was, one of the legal officers of OpenAI got up and used the O1 model on a legal brief, and then commented and said, if I had to pay a paralegal for this, would have costed me $1,000, and I just did it in 15 minutes or 10 minutes with O1 model. So the question is, if the output is the same as $1,000 paralegal, is the value still there? And then therefore, do you charge for that? It just tweaks your mind of value. A lot of things that would have required experience no longer require, like they do, but they don't. Now, here's the other side of it. I believe currently that AI can get you, let's say, 99% of the way there to whatever result. And the 1% is the biggest difference. The only difference between really warm water and boiling is 1 degree. I think humans are that 1 degree. I also think that when you pay someone for that 1 degree difference, that is insanely valuable. Right. Having someone who's an expert in your field be able to tap in that is very valuable. Talking about pricing your products, like the question is, okay, if your product can get you 99% of the way there, first off, what is the value of whatever that is? And then your human team that's involved, what's the value of that 1% to kick you over to the boiling status? What's the value of me or you as an expert in our fields to say, yes, AI can get you there, but missing this part? Like, for example, the book. I wrote the entire book with AI. However, I can tell you that it wasn't a good book. The chapters individually were good. I edited it personally for a week, making sure the concepts aligned and things were making sense. Then I sent it to a book editor to make sure it got someone out of my brain and said, don't use AI on this. Tell me as an editor, like, what we need to fix. And she went through and tweaked some things, and the end result was great. And we went through it faster than if I would have done it manually. But to get to the boiling point of the book, I had to have human involvement. Does that make sense? I think this needs to be considered in the pricing, because that dictates like your professional services pricing model, dictates your tech model of what you're doing for pricing or packaging of your products or services. It's just understanding what is the value of that. And that should dictate how you then go out to the marketplace and help communicate. Yes, you do AI for this, but you can't get it to the 1% boiling mark. And this is the value I bring as a person or as a product.
There's this myth that we live in a cut and paste world these days, is that you can use AI and just simply copy paste and you're good to go. But obviously expertise and experience still matter. want to shift our gears a little bit to AI and the impact on sales.
Mhm.
So in the SaaS world, hybrid models like subscriptions combined with things like credit burn down can be tough for reps to explain. So how can sales
Yeah.
teams use AI as a co-pilot to sell complex pricing with confidence instead of just overwhelming a buyer with more tech?
How you have AI help you with pricing specifically?
Or just in terms of selling, if you're a sales rep and you have this complex pricing or complex packages or multi-hybrid packages that you're trying to sell, can AI make life easier for sales reps by making things a little more clear and focused on the seller and what they need?
Always. There's the simple use case of just putting in a ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude and saying, here's our last conversation. Here's my pricing model. What am I missing? Whatever. Momentum, that's what we do is like we analyze calls, emails, support tickets, whatever, and analyze that with Salesforce data to make sure we know what's going on. And then we give like a package, a content package to a sales rep saying, here's your last 30 calls over 6 months. You're now at the pricing model. Remember, they really concerned about this and this. There's your value here and here. And we give them like a summary. So they have to go back through and remember all of this stuff. But ultimately, like that pricing negotiation, I think the AI is an amazing thought partner. It should not be dictating it. It should be a thought partner in the process. And obviously give feedback to the sales rep to make sure that what they're going to propose is either simplified. Like, for example, I use AI all the time to create frameworks because it's really good about taking all this stuff and like converging it. It's not good at divergent thinking, like doing separately different things. Like humans are like, oh, we can just connect this over here. And then when you have those connections, AI is really good about putting them together into a cohesive, simple way. So always getting feedback from AI of saying, okay, here's what I'm going to propose based on the conversations we've had. What do you think is going to land? Like you can do a personality type of assessment saying, okay, based on the personality type, how do you think this is going to roll based on their problems they have, based on the product, all this stuff. But like anything else, AI just needs context. It needs to know what's happening inside the business, what's the conversations you've had, what's the product you have, what the problem you're solving, what are other competitors they're looking at, what's the assessment or analysis on how likely it is or not for you to win this deal versus somebody else. There's all this stuff you need to know about that AI can help you walk through that flow and hopefully help you develop like instead of a super complex pricing saying, okay, this is complex. How do I break this down so it's easy? And then it's very good at saying, do 1, 2, 3 buckets and you're good.
In doing some research, I came across something called the grace prompting framework. Can you talk about that? And how does that relate to what sales or marketing might be doing when they're using AI?
So let's talk about grace first, if that's okay. So there's Markdown and grace. So there's different languages of prompting. There's JSON prompting, there's XML prompting, there's Markdown. I start with Markdown with beginners because it's English and so it's easier to understand for a human versus a JSON prompting. But I use Markdown. I'm going to tie in Grace in a second, but I use Markdown because it's easy to understand from like everyone uses Word docs or Google Docs. So you know, like there's a title, here's a heading, there's bold, here's all that stuff. So it's a great way to start helping people understand the importance or hierarchy of different things. I do some crazy prompting, but it's easier to understand once you kind of show it to someone, break it down. And Grace was something I developed because of actually momentum. Like I was a customer with momentum and I developed this because I was trying to control. Transcripts are incredibly messy.
Yeah.
Like this conversation is not messy. AI does an amazing job filtering it, but I found that when I was prompting before, it wasn't doing a good job of giving me a response, a single shot, perfect response every time after every call. So what I needed was to create a process so I can make sure I could fine tune the results of the AI. So it gave me the same results every time in the context of the call I was getting. Does that make sense? So I developed Grace, which is goal, rules, advanced context, clear instructions, and examples because of this. And this is back with ChatGPT 3.5, and I've kept it since because it works. Grace works insanely well for agents because then you give the same thing for agents. The only difference is you're connecting integrations and tech, and you're just referencing the tech you have access to. But once you give in the prompting world, there's a concept called few shot or one shot learning. What that's all examples is. It's just giving it examples, so it has less shots of how it's going to be performing. And the cool thing is when you give it like good examples and then bad examples of how to respond, there's some prompts I have where half the prompt is here's the list of bad examples, here's a list of good examples, and here's a skeleton of thought example at the end of how exactly I want you to respond to me, like a SWOT analysis of a company or whatever the case is. And I find that it performs really well because then it has the context and knows where it's going. Most people have a lot of ambiguous prompting styles. And fortunately, AI is getting better at reading through the lines, but still doesn't know everything because you're not communicating. So Grace is just a way to help you know how to communicate to the AI to get the exact result you're wanting. Now, I don't prompt like that all the time. Sometimes I prompt just wanting to have a conversation, and that way it's a lot more open and free willing and that kind of stuff. But when I want specific results, I'm much more precise.
Another concept that I did want to ask you about was something called tiger teams. And
Yes.
this is often
You've done your research, man. This is great.
Ex-reporter, try to dig in a little bit. So I'll get you to describe tiger teams, but essentially, from what I've read, it's used to roll out new tech inside organizations.
Yes.
So using that framework, what would it look like to use that approach to launch new AI-powered pricing models? How would you get reps and RevOps comfortable with both a new model and a new tool set without stalling deals?
Let's go back before we answer that question, answer Tiger Team, make sure people understand this. In enablement, one of the challenges we have is helping people to adopt technologies, process systems, whatever. And so the concept of a Tiger Team is to gather together, like for example, on a sales team, if you have 100 salespeople, I want to get either the top 10 most respected or the top 10 best performing, one of the two, or both, ideally. And when I find those people, I say, okay, I'm going to roll out a new tech, new system, new process, whatever. And you are my target team to tell me if it fails or if it wins. If it fails, we're not doing it. If it wins, we're going forward. If it fails, it's great because they can tell me this sucks. This is not helping me. And I want the feedback of the best in the business to tell me this is not a good process or system or change. And if it wins, it's better for me because I don't want to, salespeople don't want to hear from an able person who's not selling to tell them how to help themselves. They want to hear from a salesperson. So my role is to get out of the way and say, okay, who's the experts? How do I enable them and how do I show success? And they become my internal champions. When I roll out an AI tech process, whatever, I can say, I'm going to do a training with the team or a process. And I say, okay, team, I'm going to show you how to do this. And I'm not going to train. It's going to be your number one salesperson. Have fun. And that way I'm not getting in the way. It's not me training. It's their peer who they respect and admire getting better results, who they all want better results to have it happen. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I would think the same thing would apply to pricing. It depends on how you work your pricing model. Because, for example, with Momentum, our pricing is on the website, so it might be a little bit of a weird thing to do if we experimented, but you can still do it. It'd be like a thing where you want to have I've never been asked this question. I'm going to go off the cuff here. I would do a thing where you'd have a target team saying, okay, we have RevOps, we have the sales team, we have CS, and whoever is on the founder team or finance, make sure that they're involved in saying, okay, we're going to target this. I would take a very subset of either customers you want to expand using a new pricing model, or have brand new people come in. And when you get to the pricing pitch, you experiment with very controlled environment of saying, we're only going to pitch this next 10 deals on this new pricing model and see how it works. The problem is, and the one challenge I have with this is that there's a whole question of lifetime value of the customer that comes in mind with this. How does it impact upsells or churn or costs? Like this whole other thing that it may help me land better, but does it help me with lifetime value? Does it help me with less churn? Like that, it takes time to understand that based on your sales cycle. Does that make sense? So there's all these questions I have. Like, I want to make sure that this is not just I get more deals, but then I lose them all because of churn. That's not the way I want to go either. So it would definitely be a long-term test, but one I think would be a viable way to go to think about. Because I think what most people think about, they think about the initial grab, but they don't think about the long-term effects of what that pricing model has in the distant future.
That's a really insightful perspective, because I was reading a new report from Pricing SaaS that talked about pricing trends in Q1. And one of the things, if you boil down the report, it says that companies are changing the pricing all the time. It's, you call it's volatility, it's flux, it's disruption. Yeah. But to your point, it's easy to change prices, but it's difficult to quantify the impact of all these pricing changes, because you've got the short-term result, which you talked about, but then you've got the long-term impact. The question would be, is it possible to use AI to quantify the impact or to focus on a few metrics that matter?
I have a few friends of mine who have both predictive AI, and then there's causal AI, causal analytics, which is different than generative AI. There's different types of AI that exist that could do those type of models for you, but they're not perfect. There's always a variance of degree, and that could change with the change of the month of the year of all the crap that happens in the AI world. It's like, there's no perfect way to do it, but I think the more data you have, the better. But even if you didn't have that and you just use a ChatGPT, that's better than not, but it's still not going to know all the things about your market that you do. So if you did use just a simple chat of Gemini, Claude, whatever, you want to make sure it has all the context. You can say, okay, let's think about the end goal is obviously lifetime value, initial pricing, our ICP, the problems we solve. Here's our current pricing. Based on all of this, what do you think? Like, as long as it has that, it could be a really good conversation. But my opinion is the person who matters more is the customer. AI is not buying your stuff yet. So until it does, the person buying, whoever holds the ticket or the checkbook, that's who you need to be asking these questions to, not AI. Does that make sense? Now, AI can help you prep for it, but I don't want to have a long conversation with someone saying, hey, like with your good customers, either someone that trusts you and saying, I'm just here for feedback. I'm not here to sell you. I'll just figure this out. And they give you some really good, transparent feedback. The other way around is just experiment on live people. Now, what would be cool, that I don't know if this exists or not, it'd be cool to have some sort of tech that could do this type of analysis. I know there's things out there that does mimic your personas, your ICPs, and do tests on it from an advertising point of view. So I'm sure you could do that. But the challenge I have right now is that most people who create that tech don't have enough experience actually talking to customers to know if they actually would like that or not. Anyways, I have a lot of, even though I'm an AI geek, I love this stuff. Like, I know the weaknesses and limitations of AI. So it's like, I'd be worried about people getting false hope of, again, we could do outcome-based selling only. I'm like, no one does that. Cool, go have fun, tell me how it goes. But no successful business that does that now. What model are you going to do that? And that means you couldn't do it. There's still a world of creating it. You have to prove it out. Until it's been proven out it could work, like, why would you do that?
Absolutely. I want to take a step back and talk about ROI. There's so much focus on tactical execution and tools, but at the end of the day, if you're not getting an ROI, it doesn't matter. You've argued that RevOps and enablement should be seen as investment centers, not a cost. So if a company rolls out a platform like New to do RevOps differently or better, how would you prove ROI to the executive team beyond things like closed won? What are the early indications that it's actually working?
First, I got to ask you how you do all this research, because this is really good. Do you use AI? You had to use AI for this. This is really great. Like, I'm impressed. I think you did a really good job.
Thank you.
I've done a lot of interviews, and this is the first one you've brought up stuff that I've never had anyone talk about, which is great. I think about results a little bit differently, to where everyone has the same results they're going for: pipeline, revenue, reduced churn, upsells. It's always the same, or reduce costs, whatever the case is. How you get there, I think, is what is going to change. So, like, for example, in sales, like RevOps, you're saying specifically, my question would be, first off, for whether it's with New or the customer talking to you guys, would be like, okay, what's the sales velocity of the company? What's their average deal size? What's the sales cycle? What's the number of opportunities? What's their win rate? And of those, I take a step back from those and say, what are the processes, systems, behaviors, whatever, that's driving those things, those 4 metrics? Those 4 metrics drive revenue, all of them. And the question is, how do we know what is the friction points that's limiting us from getting that? Or how can New attach to one of those metrics to get us to the next level? Does that make sense? Because, like, for me, it's like you start at the end in mind, revenue, work backwards to the 4 KPIs of sales velocity, and work backwards from there and saying, what in our company drives those 4 metrics? Is it skill? Is it ICP matching? What is it? And what does New do that attaches to one of those things? And then you can start correlating that to that impact. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, for example, with momentum, ours is time and data. So if we can have more revenue generating activity time for the sales reps, that means they can have more deals, which means we impact both the sales cycle, we impact the ACV, and we impact the win rates. So those 4 things we can impact, and I can have a measurable difference with that. That's how I think about it. It's just like saying, what's attaching to the business results and the metrics, and how does New or whatever technology attach to that? And that's what I hyper focus on. So all of my case studies, my customer testimonials, everything I do is focus on that one thing that I know I can prove. Does that help, hopefully?
Final question, and going back to an earlier comment that you made about the 1% where AI can do 99% of the work, but you still need that humans to do the 1% to get the real value, and that's where the value is. If you fast forward to this year and beyond, what's the single most important skill that a RevOps leader should be building now to manage and lead these complex, high-velocity monetization engines? What's important for RevOps people to learn, understand, deploy, that kind of thing?
Every report I've seen from Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, Deloitte, Forrester, Gartner, whatever, in the last 6 months has always pointed to the problem we're having with AI is not the AI, it's the humans. I think that they need to double down on systems types thinking and getting beyond just doing territory planning. If they want to own the AI space, they need to understand the human change management, which requires enablement, whether it's them or a team member. The other side is, how is the data and people working through? Most RevOps people I've worked with are very good at this. And most people who, again, I respect are already on top of this, but the people who are behind are the ones who are not thinking about how the systems coincide with the entire flow and making sure they have the authority. Some of this is not necessarily RevOps leaders, but I would tell them to have the argument with CRO to give them the authority to make sure from end to end, they have control over the tech stack, the process, the systems, the data, all of it. If they don't, that's where they start to get hurt, because you'll have teams that, like, the CS leader will go buy this technology, or the marketing will go buy this one, or whatever. And RevOps is at the receiving end and not at the strategic table of saying, okay, this is what we're doing. Let me be involved, not to necessarily make the decisions, but at least be involved so we can control the chaos before we have everyone has 10 different tech stack and talk to each other. So that's number one. Two is, they definitely need to understand probably workflow automation of some kind and connections. They need to understand something like webhooks. If you don't understand what a webhook is, you need to understand what webhook is and how they work, or even API connections, which AI can help you with all of this. But once you get the systems, like, you need to be able to connect them all to some sort of place. So how do you do that? And how do you have a place where you can connect them all and think about it? I hope that helps. That's the two main things I would say to do, to make sure that you understand how to connect the data and you have a seat at the table when it comes to systems and tech. Because otherwise you're going to lose it and you'll be in the place where you're just doing territory management, which is not a bad thing. I think RevOps can do more. I think the enablement can do more.
This has been great conversation, covered a lot of ground. Where can people learn more about you and Momentum?
Momentum's easy. It's just momentum.io. For me, all the things with me is just the LinkedIn, everything I do, the podcast, the academy, Momentum, it's all fed through my LinkedIn. So that's probably the best place to go to get more of me if they want to have more of my craziness.
I've learned a lot. And if you enjoyed this episode of The Lift from New, make sure to follow, rate, and share it with someone on your team who's thinking about AI and monetization. To learn more about how New helps SaaS companies roll out credit and commit models, hybrid pricing, and AI native revenue infrastructure, visit new.io. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.